Alex, this is Jerry Smith, editor-in-chief of iconsofright.com, and had some free time, so I thought we'd do a video kind of explaining some newer movies, some older movies, and just some films that we kind of dig. Some of them have been out for a while, some of them are just coming out, so it'll be all over the place. The first one I'd like to talk about isn't a horror box set, so bear with me, but it's a box set that I am quite fond of because it is my second favorite director of all time. And that is Criterion's 5 films from John Cassavetes. If you're not familiar with him, you should definitely familiarize with yourself with the work of Cassavetes. He was a maverick filmmaker. A lot of his films were highly improvised, and they dealt with very raw emotions, something that really attracts me to a film. I like films that feel real, that kind of feel like they're not quite films, more like you're a fly on the wall seeing something just go crazy. It comes with some really great films of Cassavetes like Shadows, Faces. My personal favorite film of his, A Woman Under the Influence, starring his wife Jenna Rollins. The Killing of a Chinese Bookie in 2 different versions, which, if anyone's seen that, then they all know Ben Gazzara is crazy in that movie. Even crazier than he was in Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. Another film I'm extremely fond of, but I won't go into that because then I'll start bawling over Patrick Swayze. There is also Opening Night and A Constant Forge, which is a full-length documentary on the work of Cassavetes. I would definitely recommend picking this up, especially if Barnes & Noble is having their annual Criterion sale, which right now they are. Check this one out. The next one I want to talk about is Blood for Irina, which is directed by Chris Alexander, the editor-in-chief of Fangoria magazine and also Delirium magazine, 2 publications I am quite fond of and I'm very happy to be a small part of. This film, it really shows how much Chris is really into that old, not sleazy, but kind of sexual eroticism of old vampire films and that kind of stuff, just Franco, stuff like that. I highly recommend it. I haven't seen the follow-up to this one, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. Check it out. Another one that I recently picked up from Best Buy in their bargain bin is a movie that has no business being in their bargain bin, and that is The Adventures of Ford Fairlane. Anyone who grew up in around the time that I grew up typically loved this movie. It's Andrew Dice Clay at his absolute best. The one-liners come non-stop. There's an insane amount of cameos. Everyone from Gilbert Gottfried to Robert Englund, Vince Neil, anyone you could think of is in this movie. It's basically about a rock and roll detective, which is Andrew Dice Clay, and how could you go wrong with that? Another classic, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. It's a movie that is one of the best films of all time. It stars Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, 2 people who hated each other's guts off camera, but on camera, the chemistry is just amazing. It's about a child star who has to take care of her kind of paralyzed sister, and you don't quite know exactly the details of what happened, and it's just brutally emotional. It's amazing. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I would highly recommend getting the 2-disc version from Warner Brothers because it has some great special features on it. The next few films I want to talk about are films that were sent to me by Warner Brothers as part of their Warner Brothers archive collection. And though Icons of Fright is definitely a horror site, we also have Beyond Fright section where we talk about films that aren't quite horror but are films that we dig. The first one being The Sunshine Boys, which is an adaptation of a Neil Simon play, and it is absolutely one of the funniest movies I have seen in my entire life. This is the movie that brought George Burns out of retirement after not being in movies for like 36 years. The chemistry between him and Walter Matthau is just phenomenal. There's so many just like one-liners and zingers. It's just hilarious. I found myself just, my stomach was in pain 10 minutes in this movie. It's just absolutely wonderful. The next one is Johnny Angel. Anyone that knows me knows I'm a big fan of like those old school crime noir films, and this is definitely a great one. George Raft does an excellent job. It's one of those films that deals with like stolen money and, you know, cover-ups, people trying to get this person and stuff. It's a great one. You should pick it up from Warner Archive Collection. Johnny Angel. Next up is a film that is way out there that I typically wouldn't talk about, but since they sent it to me, why not give it a little shout out? It is season 2 of Snorks. I don't know if any of you grew up watching this, but I did. I used to watch this all the time. These days it doesn't hold up as much as it did when I watched it as a kid, but my kids seem to dig it. It's basically about these underwater creatures who just have adventures, and you know, that's pretty much it. If you don't have kids and you have a copy of Snorks, maybe you just want to like pour yourself a couple screwdrivers or something harder and sit through it and just laugh at it, but it's pretty funny. And then after that we have the Sam Fuller film Run of the Arrow. I am a huge fan of Sam Fuller's. Just everything that he's done. He was an incredible filmmaker, someone who just gave the system the middle finger, made the kind of movies he wanted to make, and just didn't give a shit about what anyone thought. Not Combat Shock, what was I thinking of? Shock Treatment. It's my favorite one of his. It is great, but Run of the Arrow is really good. It's about a soldier who kind of aligns himself with the other side, and it was kind of controversial at the time of release. Definitely worth checking out. The next one is High Cost of Loving, which is Gena Rowlands, John Cassavetes' wife, her first film role. And I've always been a fan of Gena Rowlands. She's a great actress. Everything from this to the Cassavetes films to even the more like sentimental, cheesy stuff that her son did, like The Notebook and films like that. She's great. She's always been a great actress, and this comedy is a good example of that. Next up, we have Satan Met a Lady, which is a very loose, and I say very loose for a reason. It's a very loose adaptation of The Maltese Falcon, the Humphrey Bogart, Sam Spade film. The names are changed, the characters are changed around, the plot is very different. It's not half as good as The Maltese Falcon, but it's still a pretty good little crime mystery. I'll check this one out. And last, but definitely not least, 3 Bites of the Apple, which is a comedy about a man who wins just a fortune at a casino and is kind of duped out of his money, and he has to go on this worldwide trip to kind of get his money back. It's a hilarious film. It's just yet another reason to really praise Warner Brothers for their archive collection. They're really going out of their way to release very good movies that kind of go all across the genres. Another one that I don't have with me currently right now, because I think I let someone borrow it, or who knows where it is Wolfen on Blu-ray, the 1981 movie with Albert Finney, Edward James Olmos, and one of my favorite character actors of all time, Tom Noonan. A film that got swept aside that year because of 2 werewolf films, American Werewolf in London and The Howling, where a big misconception is that Wolfen is a werewolf movie, which is definitely not. It's more about this Indian tribe who becomes wolves to get revenge on people for a curse, and it's known for having this really cool point of view of the wolves, and it almost feels like the point of view of the Predator in that Schwarzenegger movie, but it was done before that, and it was done using the Steadicam back when that was still somewhat of a new thing. So I would highly recommend picking up The Wolf, and it's a great movie. In fact, all of these movies are great. If there's one that I would say you might want to pass if you're like a serious cinephile, maybe you could do without Snorks. I don't know, maybe you have children, maybe you have grandchildren or nieces and nephews and you want to pick that up for them, or maybe you just like smoking a bowl and watching some crazy stuff. I don't, but my kids love the Snorks, so I thought I'd mention that one. So that's all for right now. Next time we'll have some horror films to talk about. Until then, have a great day.